Well, let's face it, just about all of us in Detroit think we know the history of the auto industry and the way the UAW was formed, the battle on the overpass with Walter Reuther and his allies in the UAW being beaten by Harry Bennett's thugs from Ford Motor Company in a bloody battle there. But there was so much more to it, and the full story is being told by a man who probably listened to all these people who thought they knew this and said, "You ain't heard nothing yet," because he grew up the son of a UAW leader. Bob Morris, whose dad Ken was one of the leaders in the development of the union, has written the story based on conversations with his dad and other records. The book is called Built in Detroit, A Story of the UAW, a Company, and a Gangster. And Bob Morris in studio with us this morning. Good to see you.
Good to see you, Frank.
So your dad, I mean, you got the pictures of your dad's beating. That wasn't told in those days of the Harry Bennett overpass wars.
No, it wasn't. It was, and more importantly, it wasn't remembered. Actually, his beating and when it happened was headline, for about 2 weeks was a headline story in the Free Press News, the Detroit Times. Mm-hmm. But then it faded away, right. And it came back again, ironically, in the Kiefhofer hearings.
Now, was that before the Reuther confrontation?
Yeah, the Battle of the Overpass
right.
was 1937. My story talks about the UAW growing in the 30s, the battles internally and externally that took place.
So what happened with your dad?
Well, with my dad, he came to Detroit with nothing, worked at Briggs, got involved in his local union, was very active. Then World War II came, and he was away for many years, about 4 years. He comes back. He's elected unanimously to his position. But something was going on at Briggs, and it was an effort to, frankly, get rid of some of the strong labor leaders. And Ken, 6 months after his return, is beaten to within an inch of his life. And
he was just getting out of his car, right? He parked his car?
Oh, yeah. Ken is one of the most nonviolent people on earth. And he was just getting out of his car, and some people some thugs went after him with blackjacks. Several fractures of his skull, broken arm, broken leg. They really didn't think he was going to survive, but he did. And then so the book deals with that, but also then deals with some additional violence, which was the shootings and the assassination attempts of Walter and Victor Reuther. And what we come to find is we're pretty sure that the same people who went after Ken were the same people who tried to assassinate the Reuther brothers.
It's amazing to think that could be done. You know, I mean, if that was going on today, imagine the scandal and the investigations.
Well, that's it. And there are some issues with the Detroit Police Department and some other things that went on. But it also helps to explain why there was a kind of a chasm between labor and management.
Yeah. And how short-sighted management was at the time.
Earlier today, you had Keith Crane talking about how the UAW's, really one of the better unions. I only wish that there had been the opportunity for the business community and the labor community to try to work together rather than have the battles on the picket lines and the fight for recognition and so forth.
Do you think, though, in the end, that all of that and what your dad went through really made the UAW stronger over time?
Well, in some ways, it certainly made it
tough. It's a hell
of
a price to pay.
Well, that's absolutely true. But, these guys, and one of the things I learned is these leaders of the UAW were young, smart people. They would have succeeded, in terms of wherever they went. And so but these guys learned to be tough, but they also learned to be fair. They learned to appreciate if they were working with somebody, negotiating a contract. They knew if somebody was straight with them and if somebody wasn't. And the other thing that happened is in today's world, there's so much more sophistication. And back then, a company decided they didn't like the contract, they just tore it up. and that was it. And then there'd be a strike and some tough times. Mm-hmm. And my book tries to talk about a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, I'm going to come back and learn more about what you've written in Built in Detroit, a story of the UAW, a company and a gangster by Bob Morris. His dad, Ken, was a top official of the UAW. We'll continue that conversation in just a moment. Right now, let's check traffic. Bob Morris in studio with us. He has written Built in Detroit, a story of the UAW, a company and a gangster. And the story begins with his dad being beaten to within a breath of his life on a Detroit street while a leader in the UAW. Who was the gangster?
One of the toughest guys who ever walked the streets of Detroit, a guy named Santo Sam Perone. He was not a member of the mob. He was kind of an independent guy, but he was involved in in murders. If you wanted someone taken out, you went to see Sam Perone. If you wanted to bust a union, you went and saw Sam Perone. You wanted illegal immigrants, illegal booze, Sam Perone was your guy. He was an intimidator, an extortionist, and just one tough fellow.
How did he tie into the UAW at that point?
Well, what happened,
or dealing with the UAW.
Yeah, it's all a little fuzzy, but what we've been able to determine is that he had a relationship with another company in Detroit that used him to break the union. And it appears the Briggs leadership had relationships with this other company, and they ended up bringing Sam Perone's son-in-law into the company to handle the scrap metal business. Well, that created a relationship, and all of a sudden, people at Briggs, labor union leaders, started being beaten. And Ken was beaten the worst, and he was the last of the Briggs beating victims.
Mm-hmm. What happened after that?
Well, what happened is there was actually a grand jury investigation. The grand jury investigation, and much of what happened in that grand jury is in the book, but it didn't go anywhere. And it turns out that Sam Perone had found a way to get to the judge who was handling the grand jury, so there were no indictments. And then later, the Kefauver hearings came to Detroit. They looked specifically at the Briggs beatings. They basically ripped Santo Perone for the collusion and what they had done. And then eventually there's some people, the focus went on then the Ruther shootings and the relationship.
And this is the same Briggs family that owned the Tigers, right?
Yes, it is. Yeah. Walter Briggs loved the Detroit Tigers. Walter Briggs, when he created, we were the IT industry of the early part of last century, and there was a lot of money, and when you had a lot of money, you bought things, and Walter Briggs bought the Tigers.
What did he make? What did Briggs Company make?
They made bodies. They were a very innovative company in the beginning, and they made automotive body, like Fisher Body.
Yeah, they were the Fisher Body.
They were the version who handled Ford initially, then Plymouth, Chrysler, and Hudson, and so forth.
Bob Morris, let me ask you this: How do you think the